just finished my talk here with Ulrik. We had an amazing conversation about SaaS businesses, entrepreneurship, investing. A lot of talk about SaaS pricing because Ulrik is the goat on that. One of the topics that I think anyone who is involved with SaaS should spend more time with. And if you do, you will have a direct impact on your business. So tune in on every channel that you consume your podcast. I hope you enjoy. Cheers. We're all like we're got ahead of ourselves. I had to stop because I'm like, here comes some good nuggets already. Like, yeah, but before we get into that, you are pricing guru, SaaS pricing guru, I would say. You have done a lot of things, everything from investment to being advisors of boards. You are a teacher, professor, doing negotiations. You successfully built a solo entrepreneurship to over $1 million in revenue. And here in Denmark, it's pretty fun because you can see the actual company revenues and a little bit more publicly than in America, for example. Super cool. So I'm very excited. And we started talking about resistance because you booked the pricing. Jesus Christ! The pricing roadmap. Mm-hmm. Yes. I read 1.5 years ago, we talked about that you are looking at maybe coming with a second edition eventually, hopefully, because you've been talking about it on LinkedIn as well. And then I mentioned resistance, and Stephen Pressfield is talking a lot about that. And what was your takeaway from the art of war, the war of art, the art of war?
Yeah, no. So we're talking about. I read the book, The War of Art. I don't know. 15 years ago, like it's pretty old, right?
Yeah.
And I had a friend that had read it, and he was kind of stuck in his life, and we were both young, so like, are you stuck or are you just like trying to figure it out? Like it's hard to tell which is which, right? So he said, hey, you should read this book, and so I read it, and I think I read it in like one sitting, and I think I read it so fast that he got a little annoyed with me, like he had spent like days, and I basically like spent an hour and a half, and like I read the book. I think so, and I actually don't remember the book. That was what I told you just before we went on air. Is that I remember the conversation I had with my friend more than I remember the book. And basically, I think because my takeaway, and I think also at that point in my life, I think it was my late 20s, I was all about the action and sort of not letting anything stop me. So just like blowing through all the resistance. So actually, I don't think I appreciated the book that much. Just like, okay, so you should just like get it done, like instead of letting it weigh on you in some form. And I think that was my asset when I started out, was just this, let's say, invincibility complex where I just thought, okay, like what else am I supposed to do except just do something, and then it's like I'll figure it out as I go along. And I think that really was the defining characteristic of the first 10 years as an entrepreneur, is just like not stopping and just getting something done.
And I've been thinking about this because like like a first time founder, as I told you, and I can send, and I'm like, now I'm almost 40. My energy levels also with small children at home is not the same as it was. I'm pretty high agency still, like, but I think that's like the chip on my shoulder that is permanent. Like it's but when you're meeting, like when you're meeting and you're doing investments and you've been in this world for a long time, do you think that it's something that you're just born with, this like ability to get shit done? Or because you said the takeaway from this book was like, okay, this makes sense, like this is Ulrik. Like, but is it some people have it and some people don't?
I think it can definitely, to an extent, be trained. I think more what I've so one thing is execution and energy and all these things. And I think there are many ways to be effective and have results. Like one is like high activity, and other is like really deliberate long-term forward motion. All like the combo is obviously the stronger. And then, but I think what I find some people are born with more than others, although it can be trained, is a tolerance for risk. Like, how much are you just willing to flat out endure, also in terms of potentially things going south. or sideways is something that you can just tell. Some people are. I have family, for example, like, and they fundamentally do not understand my life, not necessarily because of like the academic content, but just like why would you do that, right? And why would you run the risks? Why would you, like, you have a good thing going on, why don't you want to just immediately stabilize what you have instead of trying to like bet everything again and put it on black and try to double once more, right? And I think that is, I don't think it's a necessary component of entrepreneurship, but I think if you have that a lot, it's really hard to not be an entrepreneur. And I think that was what I had ultimately.
And why now? Like, are you just not having the ability to settle, or why is it that you're driving to put everything on black again? Because now you have, I think you dedicated a book to your boys, I think, and like, you're a family man, you're successful, you're like, it's very easy to say, maybe I'll turn down the volume from 12 to 8. You'll still be very successful. Or have you, now getting older, that you actually have turned the volume down from your 20s?
No, I think I work harder now than I ever had. Obviously, family and other things, like the mix of work is different. But no, I think I put more energy into it, and I think so on a long-term basis, I'm a little stressed out that I think I only have like 25 years left to really like put in high energy. Like, then I'm going to be like closing in on like 65, 70. I think, damn, that's not a lot of time to build something like really exceptional. So I think, so that's sort of what I'm worrying about.
Okay.
But I think with, I think what you do have going for you is that whenever you have like a chunk of learning from a job or something else, that just makes it's leverage on your input, right? Like, when you're 20, you can burn 100 hours and pretty much get nowhere, right? And when you're 40, you're like, I'll make this one phone call for like 5 minutes, and then I'm going to be like 6 months ahead of my 20-year-old like self, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you have, and you should just maximize that as much as you can.
It's because it's interesting. Sometimes I get myself, I catch myself trying to be the smart Anders that I am today, or smarter Anders, I would rather say, than my 20s, but trying to like value it as the output of force, or in my 20s, because then you didn't need enough as much sleep. You were just like, but the work that I did in my 20s was pretty embarrassing. Like, it was just like, it was high energy but low touch points, maybe. Like, it was never any depth to it. And thankfully I was just, a sales guy, so I didn't really need to go that deep. I had this is your target, overachieve, done, but I was running into the wall every day, but now, like, if I would have done that, there's, after a couple of days, I wouldn't be able to go up. So now I just really need to do that, like, more focused, smart work, as you're saying. But yeah. But so you're 20 years until so what is it that now drives you? What is it that you want to, what's this exceptional thing you want to have in 25 years?
I think one of the big life hacks for me at one point was when I stopped trying to analyze why I had the goals I had. Like, it was like, well, so I grew up relatively poor, like single mom, unemployed, all these things. And she was like an old, like summer '69 type, sort of almost hippie. So money was evil. Like, in the home I grew up in, like, if you had money, you like, it was morally questionable at best, right? Which actually was fine, because I was sort of interested in money, but I was way more interested in philosophy. So I just I went and I knew that all the way from preschool. So all the way through high school, straight into university, graduate school, all this like philosophy. So I just did that until I was like mid-late 20s. And then I think the environment of the university and sort of the academic environment was too slow for me. It was like, okay, so what is it that what are we trying to achieve here? And people are like, we're going to like think about this for 5 years, and then, we're going to make it like a clever argument. And then the other guy has 5 years to like make a counter argument. I was like, Why? So I just couldn't see myself in that like progression, and nobody really. People were really content with just being philosopher and actually not trying to impact the world in any way. They like for them, like at least a lot of the people I interacted with, there was a value in the thought itself, and I just had a fundamental problem with that. I thought, hey, like if it's not somehow put into the world, I think it's useless. So, and then that's why I sort of started to converge to business. So I just started to read business books. I think mid-20s, and then I think late 20s, I sort of made the jump. I turned down a PhD. I sort of went out, and then chance would like hand me my first business. I had a crazy uncle that had bankrupted business, and I basically took that over and turned it around. And then I was set up and go, and then I started to always like, okay, so I made $1 of revenue. Now I need to make 2, and then I need to make 10, and then I need to make 100, and then 100K and $1 million. And so, and then I think 5 years into it, I paused a little bit and said, hey, okay, so whenever I hit a goal, like I immediately invent a new goal for myself. Like, so why am I doing that? Because I'm keeping myself continually unhappy and like super stressed out, right? And it was even, I also noticed that it wasn't even when I hit the goal, it was right before I hit the goal. So if I had a goal of like, whatever, $1 million, like when it was at like a 900K and I could see that I would cross the $1 million, I immediately say, oh, then I can do 2. Like, and then, so I would actually never like feel that celebratory moment of having like achieved the thing that I set out to do, because I would just continually move the goalpost on myself.
Yeah.
And then I spent, I think, some years trying to sort of figure out why I was broken. Like, why am I doing this to myself? Until I think 5 years ago or something, I basically just said, why even worry? Like what else, like what would I do with my time if not this? So why not just allow my brain to have that sort of forward motion and continually move the goalpost? And I'll chase along, but now for fun, right? So I'll turn it into sort of a sport or a game instead of let's say this big sort of existential crisis, and I'll just enjoy it.
Yeah, when you said this, it was reminding me, we were sitting drinking beers, like maybe first or second year of uni, and someone of my classmates we were studying business, and in Sweden they have this like civil economic, like it's a title, and then here you go, you now can work in a bank or whatever, and we're like, what is a civil economic, what do they earn like when they graduate? And someone Googled, and that's like 29,000 kroners, Swedish kroners. And we're like, holy fuck, we've made it, guys. Everybody's high-fiving, drinking beers. We're so happy.
Yeah.
And one guy, Frederick Thelion, he goes like, but guys, like 29,000, like we're gonna get girlfriends. The girlfriend's gonna get, get wives. We're gonna get kids. I don't think 29,000 is gonna make it, And then we're like, Frederick, you're probably right. What do you think what do you think we need? He's like, probably like 35. And then we were like, yeah, but we're probably going to get 35 like within 5, 6, 7 years of working, or just by being in the game. And everybody was like, yeah. And high-fiving beers. We made it, guys. We made it. And like at that story, like I remind myself of that when, when the goalpost is changing, that exactly what you're saying. Like it doesn't matter. If you're not careful about that, you're going to keep moving the goalpost throughout. And then you're pretty good. But, how do you balance this now with kids? Like, because being successful and running your own business, it takes, time, and you need to also put efforts in. But, like with kids, you want to spend time with them as well, hopefully. But, how do you balance that? Because there's a trade-off somewhere, right? Or isn't it?
Sure, but I think that goes for all the domains of your life, like your partner or spouse and your kids, if you work out, if you have friends, like all these things. So I think the kids actually always, for me, they were always a priority. And then so what I just deprioritized was actually friends for a long while. which like to be fair, a lot of people do when you have smaller children, right? So I did that too, and then. And then I'm actually blessed with also having a wife that's an entrepreneur. So that allowed us to coordinate quite a bit. So the way I actually got into pricing was by chance, because my wife had just given birth to our youngest son. He turns 8 in a couple of weeks. So he was born in April, and then she took 2 weeks, 3 weeks of maternity leave, pretty much, and then we had an old structure also with our first son. Like we would do 12-12. So I would do like from midnight to lunch. That was sort of my shift, and she would do lunch to midnight, and then that was it. So I had all the nights with the boys when they were growing up. But in any ways, she had a publishing contract for a book that was due, I think, September. I think maybe it was early September, and by June she hadn't written a word. And she had a consultancy at that time focused on behavioral economics, so thinking fast and slow, like choice architecture, human decision making, all these things. And she was a lot into customer journeys. And we had gotten this idea that pricing was like a part of a customer journey, and it was, let's say, perceived better as such, as opposed to just like a rational choice, like economic, like transactional number. It was more like it was part of an experience of a product and buying that product. So she had a publishing contract for a book on pricing psychology. And then basically she was like, hey, I have this contract for the book. You kind of knocked me up, so you got to help write the book. And because we had this 12-12 shift, basically we had one laptop and we just wrote the book together. So I would just sit down, write the book, and I would just get up and she would sit down on the laptop and she'd keep writing. So we wrote the book in, I think, 5 weeks. While we were doing the diapers and everything else. And then for me, that was sort of it, right? So she's like, okay, help to write the book. And the book came out, I think, in November. And then we were doing like a little bit of like release of the book and doing a few keynotes and so forth. And that was actually what got me started in what I do now as sort of pricing consultant, because people would come up and approach me after the keynotes and say, hey, really interesting, all of this pricing stuff, but could you help me like do my pricing? And then I just didn't say no. I think that was my strategy, right? So it was just like, and then people were like, what should it cost? And in the beginning, I was like, hey, I think I priced it around, I'll do your pricing, like everything for like $5,000. I was like, that's probably like, that's a rent. I'll do one a month, and then, I was in the middle of starting like another business at the time. It's like that, like so the consultancy was definitely a side hustle to begin with. I think it took about more than a year and a half before I even self-identified as a consultant. Like people would ask me, "What do you do?" I'd say, "Hey, I'm an advisor and I do this and this." Right?
It's interesting. I mean, life is in chapters, right? And I think one of what I'm most grateful about right now is that my wife and I are entrepreneurs, like, and have small children, because like we have the ability to be our own bosses, and well, the kids are dictating a lot. So who's the boss could be up for debate, but it's just so nice to be not having to stress to go to Vuggestue at a certain time because you have a forecast call or you have a business meeting at a certain time. It's that's and it will change. Now your youngest is turning, it's like 8, you said, or 7, and it's until they're 12 years old, you spend 75% with your kids, and by the time they're 18, you spend 90% with them. So it's like just short period in your life that you will have the majority of your time spent with kids, and then it's kind of nice and a privilege to be able to do that. In your book, you said that, I'm paraphrasing because that's what I do. At the core, pricing is something that works and not necessarily optimal. Like, and first time I heard you describe this, illustrated this by talking about trains. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I think the train story sort of came because I think I was given a keynote and I had to sort of come up with a way to. I think actually the keynote was I was delivering a sort of a full day like pricing seminar at Microsoft Scale Up in Berlin. So, and this was actually like 3 or 4 months after the book came out. Like, I had done some work for a startup that really liked the work, and they were part of that scale up. So they sort of like got me invited to that. And I sort of what I was trying to do with was that everybody knew like intuitively that price was important, right? Like it's how you make money. Like at least it's sort of it's a critical part of the chain, right? If that breaks, like no money. And then nobody had any idea of like how to actually do it. And then everybody seemed to be very focused on the number. Like, are we charging 100? Are we charging 110? Are we charging whatever it was, right? And fundamentally, I felt that approach missed the point. So what I was trying to sort of come up with was, hey, if you're too focused on the number, you have like mentally confined yourself to a frame or an understanding of the problem where there is like one correct solution. Like if it's just a number, then there's like all the numbers are better or worse than others, and there's one that is the best one or the optimal one, right? And then intuitively people say, oh, I don't know what that number is, and since it's a math puzzle, I must need more data, right, to support it. Like I'll need sort of conversion rate, and then a lot of people get stuck because, well, I don't have a ton of sales that I can measure or split test every month, and like my product is constantly moving, so I don't even know how I would produce that data, even if it was a priority, and so people just got stuck. So I felt that, hey, this is actually due to the way we understand the problem. And then it so happened that I was doing some reading at the time about the history of railroads, because I'm that kind of person, and then I was like, hey, this is actually really good like analogy for what's going on. So it's like, hey, okay, so the story goes back in the early days of the railroad, like the early 1800s, when railroads were like taking over the world. I think in a span of like 30 to 40 years, rail got sort of globalized. Like so in the beginning, there was like a single railroad, Manchester to Liverpool, and then like 20 years later, it was everywhere. And then railroads had a very specific business structure, similar to a lot of enterprise software, which is that it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources to build. So you have a big upfront capital investment to build the product. And then the incremental cost of serving a customer is very low. Like it costs almost nothing to actually transport a passenger. And then you have this sort of fundamental problem in trains and also in SaaS, is that it's really hard to define when you're profitable with the customer, right? Because if the cost of delivery is $0, if you charge $1, it is 100% profit, and if you charge $1 million, it is 100% profit, right? So, and then salespeople get into, well, we'll just solve it with volume. So we'll just essentially Dutch auction everyone, say, hey, like, do you want to pay 100? No. What about 90? No. And they'll just go down until like 10. Sure. And they'll sell it there and then they'll move on, right? And then what you get is that you get into this price discussion with customers, because it then sort of turns into that being sort of the operating principle of why we close. And then whatever price you choose for a product, and this is sort of my train analogy, is that whatever price you choose is going to be the right for some customers, right? So if you say, hey, we're selling something and we're going to price it at 100. For some customers, 100 is the optimal price. Like they would not pay 101, but they will pay 100, so they're priced, let's say, optimally. But you're going to have other customers that are willing to pay 200, right? So, but since you only charge 100, they are still only paying you 100, so you have what I call an invisible loss. And then, of course, you have customers that are only willing to pay 50, and those you won't sell if you stand firm on the price, unless you do give the salespeople the mandate. And that is a very visible loss. So, hey, if we charge too low, the market is going to follow, so we'll just not sell to those customers. And then the way that train solved it was to say, hey, we will just build specific products to each type of passenger. So we'll build a first class to the first class passengers, and we'll build a second class to those guys, and then the third class to someone else. And then we'll price the market. And I think that shift of not pricing the train, but pricing the customer is sort of fundamentally the way you should think about pricing. Because then it becomes, okay, what are we solving for first-class customers? That is very separate and different from second-class tickets and from third-class tickets. And that gets you into a value narrative around what something is worth and how your train can solve that for that passenger. And then you price accordingly. And then it becomes much more a question of whether that works well and it sort of positions you correctly in the market, if it's affordable and functional and all these things. And then you can forget about whether it's optimal. It's actually far less relevant, because if you charge 100 for some customers, 20 for others, and 1,000 for a third, you're probably going to get way more money out of that market, whether you're trying to figure out if the optimum is going to be like 214 and a half, right?
Exactly. I asked, like when I read this book, it was a little bit like a aha moment, because you haven't, like, especially when you've been in SaaS for a long time, you kind of just, a lot of things just becomes like user-based pricing, just becomes. It's like, and, the willingness to pay and stuff like that you're talking about. It was very, and I loved, like, how do you force, third-class citizen pricing into that? We took the roof off the train, so some literally died going over the Rocky Mountains, but they were willing to pay to get to San Francisco, right? It's but if you had the money, you would pay to not die, right? Unfortunately, as you say as well, we don't have that luxury in SaaS. Like the same leverage is maybe a little bit harder, but you do it with, you describe it with, fencing, you describe it with pricing model, you describe it in different ways. Like, so are you still, when you're out in with your customers, are you still using the Cupid model? Is that something that you're still, leaning on, or?
Yeah, so the Cupid model is an acronym: customers, users, product, iteration, and distribution. So I use that as a framework to organize product ecosystems. I was actually really excited about it when I wrote it, and I had just done a lot of different open source pricing, which, because it's open source, it requires a different way of thinking about how you monetize open source systems. So I had come up with this framework. I said, well, it fundamentally starts with a user or some sort of beneficiary, and then that user can be a customer. Then you have a straight relationship. It's sort of overlapping, or it can be part of the distribution system or part of the product. So all the users on Facebook are the product, which is then sold as audiences to advertisers, for example, right? But they also actually distributors, because they then push all their friends to also participate and become part of it. So you'll see these things. So I think that is sort of just a high-level strategic framework for figuring out what's going on, especially if I work with customers that are in some sort of vertical, right? So we're deep into, shipping or cybersecurity, and that a lot of different actors or stakeholders or groups in that segment are interacting around the product. Then sometimes making sure that you have value propositions for different stakeholders and having an opinion and directing for how they should act and how they should interact can be sort of a powerful way to build synergies into product.
So when I was, before I did my prep work, I was thinking back, because I read your book like a year and a half ago, and I was like, what do I remember? Because that's also, sometimes you read and you're poof, But one thing that was, I think the biggest thing I took with me was the job to be done theory. So what is the job to be done theory?
So the job to be done theory, this is not mine. This is Clayton Christensen, sort of formerly Harvard Business School professor. So it fundamentally states that we should try to go to market with products and services around outcomes that customers have demand for, and that really is the right unit of analysis. So instead of, let's say, focusing on customer attributes like demographical or personas, all these things, we should just say, hey, what are some outcomes that we're creating for certain participants in the market, and can we just solve for that? And then the customers will sort of self-select into it. So the way I use it very sort of practically is, for example, when we're doing packaging. So if we have a product, the traditional model of SaaS packaging is in some form of a good, better, best model. So we'll do basic, pro, enterprise, something like that. And then the way that product teams usually sort of try to figure that out. Say, well, okay, so the enterprise has all of the things, and then the pro has a worse version of that, and then the basic version is like bare bones. So we'll just like we'll pull things off, and then but there's no clear opinion about, well, what does the basic product do for you? Like, what is the problem that it actually solves? And usually, for many SaaS businesses, it's like, well, it solves like the overall problem, just less good, right?
Yeah.
And I think that creates a lot of fundamental friction in the sales process. So what I try to do instead is say, well, what is the first problem that we try to solve for the customers? So let's see if I can give you an example. I'm doing a cybersecurity project right now, and the first problem that we're fundamentally solving for the customers is to be compliant. So we're saying, okay, everything we need in order to give our customers compliance around these certain areas, we'll do in the first product that we sell them. And then we ask ourselves, well, when they are compliant, what do they then want next? Like, what is the next job that follows once we have ticked all the compliance boxes? And that is maybe to actually become more secure, right? We actually want to, above the compliance level, increase cybersecurity in the organization. So that then becomes the next package or bundle that we sell, like tier 2 on the pricing. And then we might say, well, what is the third that we want to sell as the ascension from that? Might either be, oh, now we need to work it in a very large enterprise organization, sort of across a very complex organizational structure, or it might be sort of a different ascension path where, so, well, the next problem we solve is that we try to create a lot of different, more feedback loops that not only build upon the internal knowledge of the organization, but also externally we benchmark and we do penetration testing, and we stress test the organization instead of just relying on internal capabilities, something like this. So in each of these concepts, there is a fundamental creative aspect, right, where product and management and whoever the product visionary is needs to sort of sit down and say, what are we actually trying to do for the customer? And if we get that right and we create a strong vision of that for each of the different packages we have, then it also becomes easier to sell. Like, because then the salesperson can say, well, we have this if you just want to be compliant, and we have this if you want to be more safe, and we have this if you're like a super Excel organization. So which is the right for you? And then they don't really become substitutes. They become complementary goods in a sense. But they are rank ordered.
It's I feel like when you know this, like it's like an unveiling, because it's like every SaaS pricing packages out there is like this, we're gonna solve the problem a little bit worse by additions. Like my parallel dialer, which is amazing, if you cold to have a parallel dialer is a game changer. But in their enterprise edition is international dialing. Because they're an American company.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't need a virtual sales floor. I'm alone. I don't need to have many users. I'm alone. I don't need all these other things. I just want the international dialer. Like, because this tool is useless for me if I can't use it internationally. I am international. And they basically then, as you can imagine, had to discount their enterprise, the edition significantly, just because I didn't need anything of the other things, and I wouldn't buy it, and I guess it's. But what's the big deal, so to say? Like, because they still, I'm a one person, like they discounted it, like sure they now then. What's the big deal of having an enterprise package that is discount heavily? Like, you still got a deal. Like, what's the down the line effects of not having this correct?
So there can be several. One is that if the sales force is already giving Anders like a 99% discount of the enterprise deal to sort of close him at like...
They didn't, but almost. No. Yeah.
So then that, in my experience, that creates almost like it's a normalization of discounts.
Yeah.
So that means that another large account now gets a 40% discount because they asked for it, where maybe they should have had a 0% discount or like a way smaller discount. So sometimes if you have a sales team that gives a lot of discounts, that is a sales problem. It's a sales leadership problem. So it's like how their commissions are structured, whatever the sales mandate is, like the SOP, or like the procedure that sort of runs sales. That can be an issue. However, more often, it's actually a downstream problem from the upstream issue of poor packaging, right? So in this instance, like the salesperson has two choices: either not sell this freelancer that happens to live internationally and hence needs the enterprise feature, or create a weird product configuration of like the freelancer pack plus this one feature, which like you then get, or discount the enterprise pack. Like those are pretty much the options that he has, right?
Yeah.
So the first one doesn't make any revenue, and then he's like, okay, I'm not going to go with that option. I'm going to solve the problem. Which like salespeople are usually very solution oriented. Like they'll figure it out, and they're like, okay, can I have the product configuration of like giving him just the international calls? No, that's like a heavy dev lift, so we'll not do that. But I can just change the number in Salesforce or whatever, right? And then just give a discount. So we'll do that, and then we'll move on. And then, so in a lot of organizations, you see actually they do a combination of option 2 and 3. They do both product configurations, usually for larger deals, and they do heavy discounts in order to sort of fit the customers that don't fit the packaging. And then what happens over time is that you create a combination of technical and commercial debt, which is sort of the terms that I use. And technical debt, everybody knows it's the variance of code across time where suddenly we have, let's say, something that is harder to maintain and it is more, let's say, and it's just less clean, right? And you have actually the same with customer relationships, because now suddenly you have the enterprise product, and then you have two customers on it. Let's say you have an actual enterprise paying full price, and then you have Anders paying not at all full price, and then like multiply this by 1,000, and then you have all the solutions in between, which then means that it's very hard then to set up a renewal process for these enterprise customers, because should they re-enter into like an annual renewal negotiation with Anders? Probably not. They should just send you an email and say, hey, this is the price, right? But then that becomes a bespoke issue that customer success needs to handle. This is just like a guy, and they need to look, and why is he paying so little? Oh, like there's a backstory, and they need to sort of open it up before they actually like operate the renewal process. And then whenever they want to change pricing, it now also becomes a bespoke manual process, because they can't just like bump pricing 10% for everyone, because you have all these like handmade, like crafted deals in the sales process that just weighs down the organization.
Yeah.
So what happens usually is that a lot of these companies, I usually say that from 0 to like 3 million ARR, just do that. Just sell whatever to anyone, like, because what are the options, right? So just hustle. And then from 3 to 15 million, you should have a pretty solid system in place. You can run exceptions because you're still learning a little bit, but like 80-90% of the sales that go out the door should be on the framework. Because if you don't, then you hit 15 million with so much commercial debt that the operational load of just handling your existing customer base is just preventing growth, right? So, but if you actually sort of are relatively disciplined in growing with low commercial debt, then you can do sort of a cleanup at that stage, and then you can go to 100 at a very sort of in a very efficient way, right? So a lot of the projects I have are cleanup of these sort of legacy sort of debt issues on the customer base by figuring out how would we have priced if we had done it right, knowing today what we know, and then creating that new framework, testing it out, make sure that it works, and then ultimately renewing the entire sort of legacy customer base onto the new thing.
I read on your LinkedIn that you've done over 150 pricing redesigns, and now you're talking about some patterns here. Like, is there something that maybe you have seen now that definitely doesn't work? Like, or how can you, how, is it something that you can see across industries when it comes to pricing that is just a common mistake that these people are doing, that you would like? If you just do this from the get-go, you will, this will have the most effect on your business downstream.
So I'd say that it's all about the middle of the road, right? So because on one end you have a pricing that that fake works is just to have a fixed price. Like say, we have a piece of software, it's like $5K a year for everyone. Like that's it. That usually gets you off the ground. Again, for some customers, it's optimal. For others, it's like even better. They would have paid more, but you actually get customers on that. But it's just hugely like under monetizing usually the market you're in. But you can actually build like a decent business on just a flat fee model. But that is sort of lacking any kind of price per, like any pricing metric, any kind of scalable pricing model. That is usually, those are some of the easiest ones to clean up because there's just so much potential locked. If you get to like 4 or 5 million on that model, you probably could go 25, 30 on that customer base, like for real. And I've done that a few times. So that is just a hard and painful way to grow, right? Because you're just leaving a lot of money on the table. And then on the other end of that spectrum is, well, sales will figure it out, right? And then salespeople craft every deal, let's say, bespoke to that one customer. And that just, of course, like ramps up maximal commercial debt really fast, right? And it is really dependent on having good salespeople, right? So and that usually tends to break down also around between 5 and 10 million AR, unless you're selling only super large, huge enterprise deals. That's the only thing. And even then it becomes hard to manage. So I think those two extremes, that's probably where people go, like those are the most clear examples of like what not to do. Right?
Yeah.
But the good thing is like, depending, you can be in either place and just like look towards the middle. Like if you're doing hugely bespoke, create structure and get it in there. If you're doing simple flat fees, create a little bit of scalability in your pricing and go from there.
Yeah. I like what you said about the 3 million part because I have a tendency to overanalyze instead of just doing the thing, you know, like, it's a good tip. What's the most common question you get after someone has read your book? What is the top number one thing that keeps recurring?
Oh, after people read my book. I don't know. So people actually don't. So I get feedback like some chapters are better than others and all this, and then actually I was very positively surprised after publishing the book how much positive feedback I got. And then, of course, there are things around how to actually do it. I don't think that that's a question that maybe that's what my clients actually are asking me when they come to me after having read the book. But I think it's there will always be a gap between learning something and then applying it to your own situation, right? And then I'm trying to make that gap as small as possible. I'm trying to be in not only the book but also in like YouTube and other content to try to be as specific as I can and less academic. But I think that's what most people are struggling with. It's just trying to apply it to themselves, right? Which is fair. Like that's how you get value out of it.
And it's also like kind of the consultancy playbook in a way, right? You know, it doesn't even matter that you are so clear, because I really like your book, and I mean it's like almost 200 5-star reviews on Amazon, so it's like I'm not the only one, but it's also like it's pretty clear. Like here's the framework, here's the things you should think about, you know, like, but still I can understand, especially if you're down. Let's say that you are at $5 or $8 million in ARR, you're kind of set in your ways. So even though you give the playbook, here is what you should do, it's kind of like, well, do we have the capacity internally to have a team that should run this? Or, you know, like there's, you know, like should we hire a person to do this change? Or should we just get Ulrik in here to you know, like ensure the time because he's done it before, you know. But you know, one thing that you know, you've been extremely successful as a, you know, solopreneur, and I'm guessing that you've used some of these tactics to get to this $1 million plus revenue, because obviously hourly rate, it would be very hard to get to there.
You can say that my own sort of 7 years as a solo consultant is also a long exercise in exploring different sort of packaging and pricing models. And also in just like general sort of development of my business in going up market, right? So I think I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that the first people that approached me after the keynotes of the first book was like, please help me do my pricing. And I was just say, okay, I will help you do, that was the packaging. I will help you do your pricing. Like that was the offer. And then I'll charge you like, yeah, more or less like $5,000 for it. And then that's going to be it. And then I evolved. So I would then sort of redo different sort of versions. I'll increase the price a little bit. I would try to sort of change, of course, also, hey, maybe I'll do just some designs. Maybe I'll do some designs and like other parts of it. Maybe we'll do some interviews. So I would try to sort of like chunk up the work into phases and sell that. And I think for the first 2 or 3, and then at one point I got into touch with larger accounts that said, well, that's not for us. We want to pay by the hour. And I said, yes. And then I had a target in the beginning, like we talked about targets earlier. It was, hey, I really want a client where that would be the equivalent of like $35,000. Like that would be great if I had like one account, because hey, then I could do like 10 of those, and then it would be even better, right? And I think actually my first 35K account was on time and material. I just billed by the hour. And then I started to go back to billing per project, and then a little bit back and forth. So what I do now is I bill upfront per project on a fixed fee. I insist on only doing what we call full-scale end-to-end transformation. So we will not just do the design and the analysis. We do the design, we validate, we implement, we renew the entire customer base, clean up all the commercial debt, like take you through. And our projects are usually 2 years. So we will have a fixed fee up front and then a performance fee at the end, which is usually whatever we lift the existing customer base with, we'll take a percentage of that. And then, and I think, and I've done like sweat equity deals with startups and everything in between, but I think I lifted that model as a solo consultant to just shy of $3 million a year on fixed fees, essentially charging, $40 million upfront on fixed, and say, we're going to do this work, it's going to be these things, and then there's going to be performance back at the end. And then that's how it's going to work. And of course, that has also required me to find other clients, right? So, and this is back to, again, the risk taking that we talked about, is that more than a few times during this process, I've basically had the intuition that I was ready to do larger things for different kinds of customers. And then I would cut away my base. I would just say, I'm not going to sell below this point anymore, and I'm going to try for this like higher or better customer. And then there would be 6 months where it just like burned pipeline, right? Where I knew, for example, recently I have had a lot of, before this stage, I've had a lot of clients when I knew I could sell this for like 100K plus a variable, but I just insist that it's now 250, right? And then that means that you just lose a lot of deals that would have paid 100K. And that is painful but necessary. Right?
Mm. What's in your book? You talk also about like the willingness to pay and expectation versus value. And this, when you talk about this is what I'm thinking a little bit about as well. Because that, I guess that because of you have the 2-year commitment as an end-to-end project, you can also now then increase the allocation of, not allocation, but like your attribution of your value in this process, and therefore the willingness to pay go up in the end to have this variable fee. Ulrik and the team did so much work here that now, if they weren't, we wouldn't have had these renewals, we wouldn't have had this increase. I've started 2 companies in the last 1.5 years because staying focused is. Yeah, my wife is now telling me that I'm not allowed to even say anything else than these 2 words like this. Like
it's my wife.
Yeah, she's the brains of this operation, and the looks. But in this model, I do procurement consultancy for Salesforce contracts. It's quite common in Microsoft and Oracle. No one in EMEA is doing it except for us for Salesforce. And I kind of slipped into it because, after 8 years, and the complexity of Salesforce pricing is growing by the year. And it's like they're over 1,000 SKUs. They change names every year by design. You know, the way that the sales team is selling is also designed in order to, you know, create some friction and complexity, and you know, like it's like you write about in your book as well. But the model that I landed on was a percentage of the value that I got for the client. So we have the baseline, that is the renewal contract. Whatever per SKU betterment that I do, I take 25%. And I have gotten two very different reactions. Like, I feel like there's very many that's very interested in this, but it's a little bit of a friction there, because it's not, as you also write in the book, it's not how they're used to pay for consultancy services. Like, what do you think? Like, is there a way to like educate the market on that? Because in the end, the clients are happy, right? Because if I get a big commission, they have gotten a big discount. And like CFOs and CIOs, which is my buying personas, they love the skin in the game, because they're kind of a little bit tired of the big agencies and their consultancies that is just like racking up hourly rate without necessarily, you know, feeling it. Like,
but where are you seeing the friction? It sounds like a good model.
The friction is that when it becomes bigger contracts, like 10 million plus, they then see that, hey, you can get like a significant, you know, payout here, like several €100,000. And we're not used to paying consultants that amount of money. I now need to go to the CFO and CEO to actually have a little bit of a, here we're paying a consultant a blank check. That's, I think, like I've gotten those two objections on the two bigger.
So I think that's pretty normal. So I have that too. I think you just solve it by saying, okay, let's go to the board approval.
Yeah.
And then, so that is on the one end. And then, of course, the other elements of that is that the more proof that is actually going to work, testimonials, case studies, like reputation in the market, the more that is going to work. Right?
Yeah.
Because if you come, so let's say one CIO just like finds you at random, gives you a call, and then you say, hey, it's going to be like potentially a lot of money. And he's like, okay, I don't know, right? As opposed to his CIO friend saying, hey, Anas just saves us a ton of money, and he's like a killer. You absolutely should do this when you're up for it.
Yeah.
And then you are approached, and then you can give him like 5 other references, and you have like a deep library of case studies, and you can explain the terminology so that they understand how you're generating this value, which is a much different sale. Because what you're doing is you're essentially doing a lot of, let's say, you're increasing the probability that you're actually right and not a fraud. Because it's not so much the model itself, it's also, I think, implicitly their risk of losing face if you're just like a cowboy. Right?
Yeah.
So the more you can like un-cowboy yourself and just like place yourself at a solid foundation in marketing, and part of that is just time.
Yeah.
Time and reps and like more like customer interactions and so forth. So I think that on the value proposition is like one part of it where, okay, so the value you can generate times the probability that you can generate it, and it's like social proof and all these things. So that is great. And then the other half is that you need to have more options, right? So if you have one lead a month and you have no money left, and then that lead says, I don't know, it seems a little crazy, then your alternative to like not having the sale is starvation, right? You're not going to make any revenue and you can't pay the bills and all these things. But if you had either, of course, a pile of cash, or you just had 25 leads a week, then you just be like, sure, like then don't take it. Like I'll just go to the next one and give him the deal, right? And then that, of course, creates another dynamic. So I think in a lot of negotiation, the solution is not at the table. It's actually walking away and building a backup and saying, hey, I now know what happens if I sit down at the table again and just say no, right? And that creates a different dynamic. And so I think realizing that sometimes is like the aha moment that makes you, oh, I'm actually at the wrong table. I'm so my negotiation position here is so soft because I really don't have an alternative. I know I will be pushed and be weak if they really like figure me out and push. So my solution for that has always just been to not fake it and just not defend positions I'm not willing to really defend, and just like sell at a lower rate, or just saying, hey, I'm now just going to accept the price that I can get in the negotiation, and know that the problem wasn't that I was weak in the negotiation. The problem was that I didn't have enough pipeline.
Yeah.
And then I just say, okay, so if I don't want to sit in this situation again, I should just create more valuable content and let people know I exist, and do more good work over years so that referrals keep coming in.
Yeah, because I feel like I have a software business. I know software very well. Like that's my, that's how I grew up. So that's kind of easy, like, but the consultancy procurement business is a new muscle for me. Like it's different sales. Like the things that works in a SaaS business motion is not the same what you say here, like time in market feels so much more relevant in the consulting side, because like you in software, I have my ICP, I have my buying persona, I have my value proposition, I know what object is going to happen, like boom, boom, boom. And I know a lot of those things as well as a consultant, but I feel like I'm more running next to them and saying like, hey, when you're ready, I'm here. Like just to remember that I am here for you, like if you need me, and I will deliver it. Because it's also like these 5-year cycles, right? Like it's, big renewals. And so it's a little bit of a different, but pipeline solves a lot of problems. And that's also what, salespeople, like when they're on 100%, they walk away from the table a lot more, and therefore that's why they hit 200%, right? It's a lot of times. It's good insights. Negotiations, we just tapped out a little bit. You are you teaching at CBS still, or you taught at least for many years in CBS?
I did a 5-year intensive masterclass for the executive MBA with my wife actually. So which was a lot of fun. So we've done some work together. So she used to be a teaching assistant for the negotiation class at Harvard Law School, and we were both at Harvard at the same time. And so so she did all that. And we have done a lot of negotiation in the past, negotiation training and so forth. I've done a little bit recently here, so for CBS, but also for some public management leaders, actually in Aalborg, and for a master's degree there. So did a full semester there, actually. So, but I like negotiation. I think it is from a pricing angle. I try to, depending on what kind of price point you have. But if you have a price point where there's going to be a salesperson involved and there's a conversation and so forth, as opposed to like self-serve, like product-led growth. I like to know whenever we design a model how it is going to be negotiated. Like, what am I actually, like, if I were to sell this, what would I say and what would be the weak points? Like, what would be the counter arguments and what kind of friction would I experience in explaining these things or getting this across to the customer in some way? And then you also need to sort of figure out, well, how does a model break down properly, right? So I think, I don't know where I have it from, but I think I heard something somewhere that said, well, why does an ashtray for a submarine cost like $1,000? And I think that basically the answer was, well, because if it breaks in a certain way without splintering, so we have to design it so that it breaks down properly under the conditions in which it's going to operate, right? Which is like, that was the reasoning for why submarine stuff had to cost a ton of money. And I use that example as like a pricing model should do the same thing. Like if it is being put under intense procurement pressure, it should break down in an orderly fashion. Like you should know exactly what kind of discounts or concessions you are giving, so that you end up selling something that you actually want to sell, right? And I think just preparing the model so that sales like can equip it in that way and wield it in the negotiation is just like a pro tip for whenever you're designing something that actually needs to go through sales.
It's because sales will do whatever it takes, like to hit their KPIs. It's also like make sure that you have the right KPIs for your sales teams, or else bad things will happen. And I've seen this so many times. Like I think Salesforce is a really good. They have a machine on this, and sometimes they even put some of the AEs don't understand that they're part of the machine, like that it's designed to even sometimes make the AE feel frustrated with Salesforce because that's how they can use their frustration towards their client or prospect to say, I'm trying here, like my deal desk is not allowing me to do, whatever I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But what's I think fascinating with, I'm not sure if this is the case, maybe you can tell me, in Salesforce now, when I, have looked at, I don't know how many contracts after I started doing this procurement business as well, it doesn't really matter if it's a SMB client in Salesforce or if it's an enterprise client in Salesforce. That discount level is extremely high, like compared to list price. Is that the case in like Oracle and Microsoft and Workday and like all these other enterprise, or is it a Salesforce problem, do you think, based on your experience?
So super high discounts is something that was. I think there is a geographical component to it. So US do it more than non-US, and then also there is a time component to it. So the software companies that grew up in the like old mainframe days, like 70s, 80s, 90s, Oracle is a good example. IBM was brought up with like super large discounts, and Salesforce did it too. So Salesforce, I think, very famously said, "Hey, what we're going to do is we're going to have like list prices of 100, and then we're just going to sell like year one at a 90% discount, and we're just going to reduce the discount to like 80, 70, 60, like over time, thus 10xing the price over a 10-year horizon." So it's like an inverted way of building in the price increases. And I think Salesforce actually is I think a prime example of what I would consider like a ton of commercial debt. Like they just have so many SKUs and so many legacy SKUs and so many different sort of pricing schemes and models and so forth, that if you look at their total CAC, like spend on sales and marketing every year, compared to how much additional revenue they actually get, I think it's like they spend 30 billion a year and they get maybe 10 to 15 billion of new ARR. So, and I think a lot of my sense is that a very large proportion of that CAC spend is spent on renewals. More than half, right? So they have, because of the way where they have actually sort of built a lot of complexity, where say, hey, whenever we actually invent something new, you have a couple of options. You either put it into something that customers are already buying and then raise the price, or you say, hey, this is a new add-on, we're going to sell it to you as well. We get an attach rate and so forth. And Salesforce predominantly has chosen the latter option. They're saying, hey, we will endlessly spin out new SKUs, and then we'll try to sort of put them on accounts, and we'll use salespeople to do that. So that is a very cost-heavy, sales-driven approach. And then that also creates a lot of variance, because if you have 1,000 SKUs, then the number of product combinations that Salesforce has is by far more than there are stars in the Milky Way, right? So they're going to have, even you say, how many potential customers does Salesforce have? And then you probably would have trillions of product combinations per potential customer in the world, because the numbers just get astronomically fast. Like it's like 1 grain of rice, 2 grain of rice, 4 grain of rice, like it just goes up, right? And I think this also makes the technical complexity of handling interoperability among all of these add-ons and modules a heavy lift. So my sense of where Salesforce is from a strategic perspective is they have a large budget, and they're spending a lot of the budget just maintaining the technical debt that is partly driven by the commercial framework or their go-to-market motion, and they also have a large commercial debt, which makes it very hard for them to readjust price, even if their product was bringing the value that it should, right? So, case in point, they're hiring 2,000 AE sales reps or AI sales reps, as opposed to just giving AI in the product, turning on a credit model, and just letting people buy it, right? So I think you're just going to have a lot of these legacy software place that does that. And then, of course, you have a lot of the salespeople that were brought up in those environments now going into like new startups and trying to do the same. And I think one of the issues is that it works less well than it did when you were like the only cloud-based CRM system, right? If you're one of 50 cloud-based CRM systems and you have a lot of competition in a category, it usually ends up producing a way less good and less profitable business than if you were there like the first mover and you sort of you beat the cohort growing up. So I'm seeing it go out more and more, like heavy discounting. I'm seeing discounting and the ability to discount is being pushed back from chief of sales into like a more centralized ownership around the CEO and chief of product and chief of sales. And I think also this move that you have where instead of just having a chief of sales, now you have a chief revenue officer who I think in many instances is the same person, but it sort of reflects a shift in focus. Like, what is it that we're trying to optimize for? We're not just trying to optimize for sales, we're trying to optimize for like a life cycle of things. So it is less about, I think the shift from chief of sales to CRO is actually primarily a shift from like this quarter revenue to like a lifetime revenue perspective. And I think that's healthy. And that also allows you to be less aggressive with discounts and have a more sort of disciplined approach to it.
Is it also like, there's two things that I'm thinking about now. I'm thinking about product-led growth, you know, and I also think about the way that now a lot of SaaS companies are changing from this user-based to more consumption-based pricing. Is this tied somehow? Like, you know, in a perfect world, I would want my product, enterprise product, to be so simple that there is, you know, a way for easy threshold to get in and product-led growth, and you know they use it so much that, you know, then I have a salesperson calling them, and you know, like, and that will also minimize the expectation of discounting, because then I'm used, you know, like there's harder to say that you want something cheap if you're, you know, like you clearly can prove the value, you know, like any enterprise salesperson also like would try to build a business case that is validated, because then you know you have buying from the business, like whether. And now what all these SaaS companies are, not all, but when even Salesforce is saying like, hey, the future is in not in user-based pricing, you know, like we need to have consumption-based. What do you see there? Like, is there something there?
So I think the first is to they're not necessarily opposed. So just from like a simple framework perspective is I separate what I call pricing modalities from pricing metrics. So modalities is either flat fees, licenses, usage-based, or credit models. They're those four, right? And then the pricing metric is what you count. Like you count users, you count API calls, you count something else. So a user, for example, can be a license, like I have a right to 20 seats. But it can also be users-based in that, we're just counting how many actual seats you've spent, and then we bill you in arrears. So the metric and the modality is actually disconnected in this way, right? So, but the traditional model for SaaS was a flat fee, like we're just going to pay for whatever, and then it was like, we're gonna make like a smarter version, and then we're going to pay like a license for users, like user licenses, and then that is now moving to. And I don't want to say sort of that it's outcome-based pricing or usage-based pricing. So I would rather say that what I now see is that a lot of more and different models are being put into play. And some of them are license-based, and some of them are usage-based. And that depends on the scenario that you're getting into. So for example, if you're selling something like a major 3 or 5 year contract to defense, it's going to be extremely hard for you on some of the primary drivers in the contract to have a usage-based model, because they want to know what it's going to cost them, right? So they fundamentally prefer a license-based model because they don't want to give you like an open-ended access to their budget. But you can then put certain elements of it, like, this actual IT infrastructure, like the storage, you're going to pay for, and that's going to be usage-based. And that's usually more acceptable, but that's mostly also on a cost-plus basis. Like they're fine with covering actual costs, but they're not fine with paying, let's say, a value-based premium on something user-based in these contracts. So I think you just need to know who you're selling to and then make that happen. But I would say you can even have an outcome, meaning something that the customer actually wants done or to achieve, and that sits at the end of their value creation process, and then have a license for that, right? So let's say we're saying, hey, our software generates leads, right? And essentially leads are for how many like sold customers we have. And let's say we support that entire process and we say, well, we are going to sell you based on how many customers you have that bought this product that we support, and we're going to do that on a license. And then if you happen to sell more customers, we'll increase the license. But it's a known number and it's paid upfront. So now you have the combination of license, paid upfront, fixed number, and an outcome, meaning something that customers actually want more of in and of itself. And I think that's the fundamental issue that a lot of people have with user-based pricing, is that in most cases, not all, but in most, users are just an input. It's a way to create value. It's not something that I actually want, right? So let's say that you have, let me give another example. If you're running a community software for municipalities, and you then actually user-based pricing might be what they want, because they actually want users, they want the citizens to participate in the software. So for them, it's an outcome, right? But if you're selling seats to an enterprise license that does something with infrastructure, they'll basically say, well, how many users do we absolutely need as a minimum to run it? And then we'll buy that, right?
Yeah.
Because they just want to minimize the number of users.
But it's also like, so my product is sales enablement product, like based on MedPick framework. I'm not sure if you're familiar. And in Salesforce, you can either sell, when you're an ISV partner, you can either have it as user-based or on the org. That's the only two pricing options you have, which is fine because everyone in Salesforce is familiar with this. So they would be confused if an ISV partner would, bring in something else. HubSpot, on the other hand, has a completely different culture. Like if you don't have a freemium model on HubSpot, they're like, what's going on? That's basically, I want to test it out. So, and the most logical way of pricing my product is how many qualified opportunities is that you're using this on. Because it's like, now I don't use it on stage 1 opportunities because MedPick is not going to be, there. I'm maybe getting it to a identified pain process. But when that is ticked, like the probability goes up to 20%, now it's an active. And in HubSpot, it's, very easy to do opportunity-based cost. And then you just like, you have X amount of opportunities, and then you buy it in, So it's also the cultural difference between, you talk about fencing, right? Like the CRM fencing. No one in Salesforce would be upset that HubSpot user is paying a different way, but it's, it's very, but because of the history of user-based pricing, even when I talk to HubSpot users, they're like, this makes sense, yes, value, but what about like user pricing, and I'm like, no, we're not doing that on HubSpot, like but it's still, they're so used to have it in a certain way that it's almost like, how can I defend this internally? Because this price is, our HubSpot pricing is, $25 per user on a, low end, or $100 for a high end. And this product is costing X. Now I can then, it's an easier way of selling it internally and basing the business case.
Yeah, I mean, so easy math helps grease the wheels, right? So I think, but the way, so maybe this is sort of illustrative, right? So if fundamentally what you're doing, if you look at like the value creation process of the customer that you're helping, it's like, okay, so we have something to sell, right? And then it's like, okay, so how do we do that? Well, we're gonna get some salespeople, and then we're gonna get them like some tooling so that they can actually be effective, and then we're gonna get like a bunch of leads. And then we can qualify those leads. And then those leads, some of them go to like the later stages of the funnel, like right before they're closed. And then some of them close, right? And then there's revenue, right? And if you look at this as a chain, you can say, well, if you price the users, then you're pricing the input, like the first part of the chain. And then you're just saying, well, it just costs more to run this entire thing. And if you say, well, we price only the like we price leads, but not like qualified, unqualified, just like total leads, then that is maybe better. But if you price qualified leads, that's even better. Like now you're closer to value, and the closest to value would be, I'm just going to price the closed sales, right? And then you say, hey, I'm just going to do whatever, like, and then you only pay if you sell. And then and then you say, hey, if you want to get even better, it's like you only close what you sell and you actually collect, right? Because there are going to be some that you don't, and whatever, cancellations and so forth. So the further you go down that chain, the closer you get to the actual value creation. And then what the question now becomes is, well, how much of a responsibility do you have for actually creating the outcome? And then that's sort of that's the process that you have.
Like we talked about earlier, when you're like, you have been in your projects now, you have 2 years, so it's no question that you haven't had a direct impact on this. Whereas, if someone says, well, I sell you a sales training, and then oh, you have your increase of revenue, and I'm like, well, thank you very much, and then like, no, but all about the other million things we've done to
and so what I'll do actually, so what we do is we usually take and roll out new pricing to new customers, and then once that works, we'll then take the new pricing, and roll it back to the old customers, like the legacy base, and then we'll actually only charge on the lift of the legacy base above the historical NRR rate, right? And that's our way of saying that surely must be our fault, right? Because even if we take, I have a customer I'm helping right now. It's the Eastern European procurement system, and we basically just tripled the ACV of incoming accounts in the new sales, right? And then, but you can always make an argument that, well, it's because we also did this other thing, and we got this new chief of sales that's really good, and we changed their marketing and the positioning and the website or whatever, right? So you actually never know, because there's so many confounding variables. So if you really want to charge the high cut of value, you need to balance whether you're trying to find a piece of value that you can absolutely own and is attributable to you, or you want to have like a small size slice of a larger cake. We say, hey, we kind of impact this, but we're only taking a very small part of it. And then that's the discussion, right?
Yeah, that's there's so many angles here, and I think a lot of founders is put on a pedestal as well. Like it's been this like founder glorification, so they kind of you expect them to, oh, they know everything. Why shouldn't they just like they got into YC or whatever? Like, oh, like. But the reality is that everybody's just trying to figure their shit out, and this is one topic that is so valuable if you spend a little bit of time on it. Like you're right that you should increase your price quarterly, and if not quarterly, at least once a year. So I have a note that now like need to increase my prices. That's one thing I guess like would be good advice for founders. But is there any is there like is there any other advice that you can, do you think that this mistakes that founders are doing, that not necessarily only pricing, but you have a wide experience in entrepreneurship and leadership? So
that's a very broad question.
Yes,
but for that, like how often should you change price? Just to like give a little bit more call on that. So quarterly is good, but trying to think of it this way. This is sort of what I usually say, is that the rate at which your product cycle moves is the rate at which what you actually provide to the market changes, right? So if you're only providing updates every year or every other year, like maybe don't review pricing every quarter, right? Because why, right? So but if you're like pushing out every week or every 2 days, like then you have a lot of change to like build up, and then probably waiting a year is too short a cycle. And then parallel to that, you have your sales cycle, which is the rate at which you learn. Right? So if you have a 30-day sales cycle and you push product on a 30-day cycle, a lot happens, and you're a startup, you probably should review this every month, because you actually get to, oh, the product changed, so where do we want to be now? And then we actually learn something because we had a sales cycle to learn in, and then you change it and then you move forward. Or at least consider changing it. You can say, hey, is this something we want to spend bandwidth on, and do we have a sense that something should be looked at? And then you just like have that meeting for 10 minutes, and then you say like, no, let's not do anything. We'll push it another month, and then you do it again, right? And so usually for longer contracts and higher contract value, annual is fine. But if you do monthly pricing, like look at it monthly or quarterly. That's sort of the rule of thumb. With regards to entrepreneurship, I think what has really been, I can tell you about something that sort of worked really well for me. And I think what worked really well for me was, I don't know sort of where I particularly got it, but there was a few experiences that really sort of hammered home the point, is that I always insisted on there being a better way to do it. Like, it's almost like I'm like, my entrepreneurship career is like fiddling with like a Rubik's Cube or like a padlock. And I just know, like, if I did like just the right moves, suddenly it would like open or pop or solve, right? And then, so it's just continue like trying to figure it out rather than feeling that you're stuck and the external conditions are determining sort of the result you're getting, right?
Yeah.
So I think just having that ownership, that's saying, hey, maybe I don't know how, but there is, I know that if I push the exact right combination of buttons or actions in the next 2 weeks, my business would be fundamentally different, right? And the only thing that is keeping me from doing that is just ignorance, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just have to figure it out. Like, I'll do what I can, but that's basically it. But just having the belief that it is possible has been sort of has been good for me, at least in terms of like motivation and creativity, and just like keep trying, right?
It's also pretty cool then when you realize that if you put energy into it, and if you're like focusing intently on something, that you are able to change the reality. Like, like what you thought was the reality. Because it's all about this. There's so many things we tell ourselves, right? And then when you pause and like, well, is this story true, or is this something that I'm just used to? Or like, also when you get kids, is this what I want to say, or is it just my parents' voice coming out of me? Like, there's sort of everything. There's I can see some of that. If, challenging the ignorance. You also said that you read a lot of business books. What is your favorite business book, or book in general? You also love philosophy, so is there a Venn diagram there?
I tend to go through phases of who I read and why and what and so forth. So I had like many years ago, I had a Warren Buffett phase. So I did like all of that, all of Charlie Munger and all of these things.
Stay in the market, as we said earlier.
Stay in the market, and then and also I think Warren Buffett speaks a lot about price, and he also, I think, fundamentally speaks about the concept of time, and also of delighting the customer. Just like, if you keep providing something good over time, it's going to work out. And I think a quote from that period that really stuck with me is Charlie Munger, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says, like, if you like, the most reliable way to get something you want is to deserve it. And just like, stop trying to overthink it, and just whatever it is that you want, just try and deserve it for a really long time. And then, at least if you don't get it, you can still be proud that you deserved it. And then, of course, chance and life and circumstance will pull you in different directions. But I think that's that just not trying to get rich quick.
No,
but just trying to just like deserve it and get there slow, I think was really valuable for me.
Enjoying the journey. And it was like same. He's like, as in business as in life, trying to be the partner that you attract someone else. And like, if you're building something that customers want, then they will find you. Like, you don't like, there's, and then when you sell, it's going to be a lot easier. It's but let me rephrase that question. And say, like, which are your most gifted book?
So I have a few. So the way I buy books is, I'll buy a book, and if I like it, I'll just buy 10 more and I'll give it away. So
I like that.
Yeah. I've had a few. There is a U.S. coach that wrote a book called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." Marshall Goldsmith. So he basically wrote about this tendency that executives had. That's what he works with, to like have character flaws, and then some of those character flaws could be really effective for one part of your life, like impatience. Let's say, gets you moving. But then once you hit a certain level of your career, suddenly it becomes an obstacle and you need to change. And then I think he has a really powerful message with his saying, like, why do you have this, like, why do you need to have this very strong sense of identity instead of just changing for whatever the circumstances require you of? And I think that was So I've gifted that a lot. Then I have gifted a lot the one consulting book that I consider to be like superior to all the rest, which is Alan Weiss's $1 Million Consulting. So I think 2 years in to my consulting career, I basically self-identified as a consultant and then thought, hey, then I should probably like read books about how to actually do this. So I went to Amazon and bought like whatever 10, 15 different ones, and then basically read this one and threw away the rest. And I've worked with Alan as my coach and advisor, also on a one-on-one basis for a large like period of the time. And I think so he has a lot of things around value-based fees that was really easy to, I think that doubled my business just in a couple of weeks. And then he also has a very pragmatic approach to relationships and driving client value, which I think also helped me a lot. So it always reminds me that whenever I get too stuck in my own head and forget about the reason I'm actually doing this is to improve someone else's condition, that's also usually when my business starts doing less well or like lose momentum. When I was like, oh, I need to close this sale because I want to make this money, is not a good frame of mind. But if I say I need to close this sale because I really know that I can help you and you should absolutely positively do this and it's going to be awesome, is a better frame for them and me, right? So I think that's that. And then I've given a lot of Steven Pinker books away, and I've given a lot of Yuval Harari books away. And I think the book I'm giving away right now, which is a little weird, is this American entrepreneur called Alex Hormozi.
Yeah.
He's written a book called $1 Million Office, which is good, and he's written one on leads, which is good. But he's also written an older book about running gyms as a subscription business, which is the one I'm gifting.
Yeah.
Because for people running subscription businesses, even though it's about gyms and it's about off-selling and cross-selling and designing sales processes and so forth, it's so stacked with, I think, tactics that if you manage to make the mental lift from one context to another is just a goldmine.
He is a high energy guy. I like him as well. It's he delivers a lot of good nuggets. I think the criticism sometimes can be that he's a little bit hustle culture, but it's also like it's who he is. Like that's just him. Like, and if you don't like that, you listen to someone else. Like it's okay. And everybody doesn't need to like everyone. You also have been doing angel investments for some years, and you write that you do 2 to 5 a year. Is it someone that you are extra excited about, or something that you're working with that you're like, that's a cool project right now?
So I like all the investments I have.
Of course, all children are created equal. Yeah.
So I'll tell you sort of the last thing that I invested in, because I don't think I do 2 to 5 a year anymore. I think part of that is that I've just realized it takes time. So I've scaled back quite a bit, and then so I do check sizes of maybe 150K US. About, right? And then it's been a while since I've given one out, but I've given one out just recently, and that's to a compliance tool run on blockchain, actually for gaming studios, for indie gamers. So it's called PixelPie, and I think for me that's also that was very much also driven by who the founders were, and not so much necessarily the category or the product, but it's just I've known especially one of the founders for 5 or 6 years, and he's older than me, and he's a household name within financial compliance in Europe, and so he's doing that, and he's also extremely high energy. So I have confidence there.
So do you say that that's the main thing that you're looking at, is the founder when you do this check? So what variables are you looking into when you're, because like being an angel investor is quite early, right? Usually, or with series pre-seed, seed, Series A at the latest, right?
Yeah. So I think this one was pre-revenue.
Yeah.
Even to some extent pre-product. So I think I look at a combination of things without having sort of real framework. I think I fundamentally look at like, could this make a lot of money without me having to make a lot of assumptions, right? I think that's sort of it, right? So like less risk for more upside. If you break it down on a formula, that's basically it. So and then that means that it needs to have a fundamental like value proposition to a customer that makes a ton of sense and isn't predicated on somebody like having a certain worldview or caring about something. But if there is pre-existing demand and we can just tap into it, then that's great, right? So I have a story about this where this was not something I invested in, but I think this goes like back 5 or 6 years where I had 2 meetings in the same day. In the first meeting, before lunch, I had a meeting with some entrepreneurs, and they had built an app for mental health for college students. And they were like, "Hey, the app essentially it creates like a context for having meaningful conversations, so that people will connect socially and feel less lonely, and it'll lower suicide rates and so forth." So and they had pilot tested it, and the users loved it, and universities loved it, and I was like, "It's not going to make money." Right? It's like, who's buying this, right? And I was like, yeah, but they thought about maybe letting the students pay for it. I was like, no, they're going to spend their money on like books and beer. Like that's pretty much what students pay. And then the universities is very low, like on their total list of priorities. They like the idea, but they're not going to buy it. Second entrepreneur, later in the day, he was like, hey, I needed my windows cleaned. And then the process of hiring window cleaner was like super awful. So I created this portal where you can just like buy window cleaning with the click, and then the guy cleans your windows and the invoicing is handled. Like, yes, that's what you do. And he basically said when he created that business, he like the wording he used was, it was like holding my cup out and the water was already running. Like there was pre-existing demand in the market and I just needed to capture it, as opposed to generating it and like pounding it up. And I think like that is just a good start for business. Like if there just is demand, then you can solve for almost anything else downstream. But if there isn't a demand, or it's like really hard to articulate or get at because it's like buried deep in budgets that are hard to access, that's just difficult.
Yeah.
So that is one of my main criteria. And then just having that and good people, good combo.
Yeah, then you're sorted. We have a little bit of time left. You're scaling your company now. You're going from solo to hiring. What's next on what are you excited about? What's your next chapter?
So I think I'm excited about that, right? And I think it's right now, it's like in the grand scheme of things, it's not super fast, but I think I'm going from like one person me to, I think I made my first hire in November. And I think, 6, like this summer, we're going to be 10 people. And then the first step of that is to have delivery not handled by me exclusively, right? So I think that's going to be like task number 1 to have really good people do that. And then I've been very fortunate with having actually, so I hired 3 senior people that are quite senior, and 2 of them actually are former clients of mine.
Okay.
So one is sort of a let's say a term CEO in a private equity format. So he usually runs like turnarounds 2-3 years at a time, and I've run projects with him in his last 2 businesses. So he's joined, and then the other one, Chris, who came in as my co-founder for this next part of the journey, has been 16 years in Saxo Bank, which is like a mid-size tech platform and investment bank in Europe. And he's been there from, there were 100 people to over 3,000, and run like a ton of internal projects for them. Been head of platform development, for example, and also running like a deal desk with 60 account reps on global sales and that. So he's a monster on just getting stuff done.
Nice.
So that's pretty good. So I think for us, it's just building that out, and also like taking skill sets like that and being able to give it to clients. So I think it was really important for me to not hire people where I would feel like it was a downsell. Like I would say, hey client, instead of getting like the good, better, best model, like I'm the best version and then like everybody else is the good and better. I actually just wanted like a best squared, where I said, hey, I can do something really well, but if we compare it with like this person's excellent, like I have like the one that isn't a customer, he's been like a VP sales for 15 years and been doing like go-to-market strategies for HubSpot, for example, and for Boston Dynamics. So he just has a skill set with sales organizations and customer success and expansion revenue that I don't have, right? And then if I can teach him to do pricing, then we have something that is better than what I could do.
And where is, willingness to pay? Where are you like in the 5 years? Like, what do you want to be in 5 years? You have 25 years left in your professional career. What would you do? You're just gonna enjoy the journey and just have fun on the way, or do you have like this is where I want this to be? What willingness to pay is, like, where the culture or where the...
I just needed to improve. So I think another sort of thing that really, so when I hit 100 million euros a year 3 years ago, I think, as a solo, right? And then I would constantly like, oh, now I need to hit 1.5, and I think that was just really stressful to have that like top line number, which is essentially a lagging indicator, like a revenue is a lagging indicator. And then I found out, oh, it's much more operational for me and nicer to just hit input revenues. So just say, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write whatever 700 LinkedIn posts a year. That's my target. And then I'm going to do this many YouTube videos, and then I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to say yes to X number of podcasts, whatever, right? And then if I do that, then the revenue will take care of itself. Like that was just, and then I'm going to not sell anything below this number. So I set things on my plate that I could control, and then I just let the result be the result. And I think it's the same thing here. So I say, I think my near-term target is to have a client that is happy without it being my fault. Like that's like as simple as it sounds. That's sort of the target for 2025, right?
Yeah.
Because that means that somebody else did it, right? And then the revenue will follow, I'm sure, and then we can build it there.
You do 700 LinkedIn posts a year? Because I know you're like your LinkedIn game is strong. Like you're a great follower, but I didn't realize that you do that many. Or even if it's half of that, like once a week, once a day, is insane.
So yeah, so I'm at 1 a day now. I've been at 2 a day, so I can see that's just a linear relationship. If I do 2 a day, I'll grow my audience 2.5-3% every week.
Yeah.
If I do 1 a day, I'll do half that.
Yeah.
So my target is to actually say, and part of that is also like, I can't do that on my own. So, hey, if I had a team that could do some of the delivery, I could possibly switch it to 5 a day, right? And then maybe I would grow 7% a week. And then because of the compounding nature of these things, my business will 20x, like from a reach perspective in a year, as opposed to 3x, right? So I think sometimes just knowing what kind of inputs and outputs you have and just focusing on that is that. I think fundamentally, a lot of entrepreneurs, getting back to like what is the advice, they realize too late what good looks like. And I'm not saying necessarily that like LinkedIn posts are good. So I have a lot about also what goes into them and what good posts are in these things. But I think really having reset your expectations on quality and input and all these things as much as you can, which for me has just been to get as close to people that are high performers as possible. Just like figuring out what do they actually do? Like what does a game social media production actually looks like?
Yeah.
And that's not 1 post a day. Like it just isn't, right? That's 30, right? Across
is it
platforms.
30? Is the high is the top of the game is 30 across channels,
If you look at what you follow, for example, on LinkedIn, and you look at, so if you sort like top to bottom on like most followers that you have, like people you currently follow, there is a chance that Gary Vee is going to be at the top, right? Because and if you then look at how much activity they have, you can see there is a perfect correlation.
I need to step up my LinkedIn game.
And he's doing like 70 posts a week.
Yeah.
And he's Gary Vee, right? So he has a different, so I think It's like you scale into that, right?
Because everybody keeps saying this, like that it's it's just it's extremely hard to be consistent. That's my I set the goal to do 2 or 3 LinkedIn posts a week, and as long as but I'm hearing myself now. I'm making excuses. I love these conversations, Ulrik, because it's also a little bit like of a reminder that no one wants to listen to your bullshit. Just do the fucking work, like
A little bit.
little bit.
And I think and I think, but it's always like, where's the bottleneck, right? So I think if you don't have customers, then you have time, right? Then do the 5 posts a day, whatever, right? And then, or do like 2 posts a day and schedule them so that whenever you are busy, then they keep running and the consistency goes up, right? And then at one point you get like, hey, let's do 3 a day, right? And then you build it up slow, right? So I think that's fundamentally it.
Yeah, we have to wrap. Like I could do another hour easily, but we're having we have to wrap now. And is there any place you would like people to direct people, or anything that your LinkedIn is probably really good. Your YouTube channel as well.
So if we just do the list, like the website willingness2pay.com will like orient you to every other platform. So I think that's the one place. And then I want to give a shout out actually also to, so on my website you can find my LinkedIn, my YouTube channel, all these things. That's great. There's a lot of content there. But I think there's also one other place that really like deserves a shout out, and that is the Pricing SaaS community. So pricingsas.com, and I think the community is the subdomain like community.pricingsas.com. It's a Discord community, and so the backstory is I started a pricing community, it grew to 500-600 people, and then these 2 guys, Americans, Rob and John, sort of took it over and just migrated it to Discord. And so I think for everybody that's like, hey, SaaS pricing, I like that, go join it there, because I think the idea is to, let's say, keep building the sort of like watering hole for SaaS pricing on the web, and those guys are good, and they have a ton of great content. So and I'm gonna also participate there with like fireside talks and all that.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Ulrik. That's the pod.
Thanks, Hannes.
I'm just gonna do a quick intro and outro.